Going up.
Prices keep going up these days. It feels like being on an elevator that only goes up.
Going up.
But not at Metro. We're pushing the down button.
Going down.
We've lowered prices. Get one line of 5G data for $40, period. That's 20% lower. And you get a free Samsung 5G phone when you bring your number. Only at Metro.
5-year guarantee on eligible plans. Exclusions apply. See website for details. Not available if at Metro with T-Mobile in the past 6 months. Tax applies.
Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
Hashtag no music, no intro. We are back. Saints Block Party Podcast. Adam with Wolf, a.k.a. Ryan, and our friend Greg Cosell of NFL joining us again, talking, reviewing the Saints draft class. Good to see you, Greg. Last time I actually saw you was in Indianapolis at St. Elmo's. We were actually in the same room enjoying some steak, Indianapolis finest. I was with another Greg Rosenthal of NFL Network. So thank you as always for coming on and just talking Saints as always, our annual tradition. Thanks for coming on and just enjoying this morning with us.
Hey, no problem at all. This will be fun.
There's a lot to talk about. There's been a lot of Saints news. Derek Carr retired on Saturday, and kind of sets the stage for a quarterback competition with the quarterback that they drafted 40th overall, Tyler Shuck, out of Louisville. Spencer Rattler, who they took in the 5th round last year. Maybe Jake Haener getting in there. I know you have talked a lot about Tyler Shuck as a prospect and your love for him as a prospect from this last draft class. Talk to our listeners who are all obviously Saints fans of what you liked about Tyler Shuck coming out of Louisville this past draft class.
Well, it's funny. Tyler Shuck was, not necessarily someone when the whole process started that was high on people's lists as far as hey, I have to go see Tyler Shuck. He was a guy who played in college. This was his 7th season. He'd been through 3 colleges. He never really had played a full season, although when he came out of Arizona, he was he was basically a 5-star guy coming out, and he went to Oregon. The reason I got into Tyler Shuck was Louis Riddick was in our building during the season pretty much every week through the Super Bowl, and he said to me, hey, because he does college games, as you guys know. Yeah. So he had done Tyler Shuck, I guess, a couple of times during the season. And, he said to me, you got to take a look at Tyler Shuck. So, I said, okay, I'll take a look at Tyler Shuck, because, I'm one guy. So I try to get through as many guys as I can. I probably see 200 guys in detail, but I can't watch 500 guys. It's just not humanly possible. As much as I'd like to, I can't do it. So I went and I watched Tyler Shuck, and I really liked what I saw. I mean, he's I thought that I start from scratch when I watch quarterbacks. I mean, I start with their mechanics, their footwork, how they drop into the pocket, how they hold the ball. You got to start from the beginning. That's the way I was taught the position by, people a lot smarter than I am. So, I thought that he had clean mechanics on his drop and his set. He stayed right on the midline, which is a big deal, by the way. A lot of quarterbacks do not do that, and that is a big deal. Because if you drift, that's the term we use. If you drift for no reason at all, you are hurting your pass protection. And all of a sudden, you create pressure that does not need to be created. And a lot of quarterbacks, they just drift. And it's even Drake May, he had to work on that, and it got cleaned up in New England. But at North Carolina, he had a tendency to drift. And, you create your own pressure. because your O-line is blocking a certain way. As you guys probably know, I do a podcast with Ross Tucker, and, he used to talk about that. We've had this conversation 1,000 times. He played 7 years in the league as an O-lineman, and he said that is the worst, because you're pass protecting a specific way for the quarterback to be in a specific spot.
Yep.
And, if he's not in that spot, that's a problem. So Shuck, I thought, was very good mechanically. And, the other thing, which is not talked about much, is ball security. He kept both hands on the ball every time he had to move. When I say move, I don't mean run out of the pocket. I mean if he just had to take a step to his right or a step to his left or climb, what we call pocket movement. He kept both hands on the ball and kept the ball tight to his body. For instance, Shedeur Sanders had a strong tendency to hold the ball with one hand.
Yeah.
And in the NFL, that doesn't fly.
No.
So, Shuck did a lot of the little things correctly. And then you look at the size, okay? And, 6'5", 225, that's a trait. People don't think about that, but that's a trait.
Yes.
I remember 2 years ago being at the Combine, and I'm fortunate enough that I can get on the field. And I remember that was the year Drake May and Caleb Williams didn't work out. But they were, right there. And I remember introducing myself to both guys. 2-minute conversation. And Drake May's, almost 6'5" and about 225, and he looks like a big man. He's a big man. I'm fortunate enough to be around Josh Allen. He's a big man. Okay, I'm standing next to Caleb Williams. He looks like a ninth grader compared to these guys. No knock on his talent, by the way. I'm just talking about size.
Right.
And in relation to Shuck, 6'5", I saw him too. I was on the field as well. That's a trait, and people don't think about that. And he throws the ball really well, and he throws the ball very easily. One thing I learned from Phil Simms going back years is just watch a guy throw it. You can even watch him in shorts and a T-shirt. He said if a guy has to work hard to throw it, that's a problem. And like, for instance, Justin Dart, Dart, yeah.
Jackson Dart.
He works hard to throw the ball.
Interesting.
And again, he may end up being a great player. We don't know that. But Shuck was an easy thrower. And he was pretty athletic too. He could move. He made throws, as everybody likes to say now, off platform. I just really liked his game. I thought his game translated to the NFL. And, he's a good athlete. Again, 40 time for a quarterback to me doesn't, mean, oh man, that's great. But he ran a 4.63 at 6'5", 219. And,
impressive.
That's pretty good. So there was nothing I really disliked about Shuck, besides the fact that no quarterback comes in the league as a finished product. So I'm not sitting here saying if he wins the job week 1, he's going to look like Tom Brady. That's not my point. But my point is there was a lot to like on his tape that projected and transitioned well to the next level.
And you brought up a lot of the points that are positive, but I guess the negative parts that keeps coming up when me and Adam watched them.
Yep.
Other people watch them. They talk about how he handles pressure within the pocket. How he's able to handle that. He's a guy that's been injured multiple times. 2 broken collarbones, a broken femur. So it did look at times like, I don't know if panic is the word, but he did, kind of shy away from pressure and just get rid of the ball, get rid of the ball quick. Sometimes he did something crazy. What were your thoughts about that? Is that something that's just kind of like innate in dealing with all the injuries, or is that just maybe I was coached like, hey, look, if you get pressure, get rid of the ball ASAP?
Well, it's funny you say that because that was one of my weaknesses, because you guys have probably seen the way I do my work. I do strengths, weaknesses, transition. Right. And one of my weaknesses was that he had a tendency at times to fall away from throws when he perceived or anticipated pressure, which he got a lot of, by the way, at Louisville. And that's something that needs to be worked. There's no question. If you can't function with people around you, I'm not talking about, free hitters where a guy's running right at you. That doesn't happen very often in the NFL, as we know. But what does happen in the NFL is pockets get squeezed, they get muddied. There's a lot of bodies around you.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to function and not break down your mechanics. And there were times he did that. That is clearly something that needs to be worked on. Now, none of us know what's in his head. Some guys perceive pressure. And by that, I mean they start to feel things that aren't really there by NFL standards.
Right.
We don't know what's in his head. I can't answer that question. But for sure, there were times where he wasn't as strong in the pocket as he needs to be.
Right. And the thing is, I went and tried to find what I could, like, from his TTU days and from his time at Oregon, how he functioned in the pocket back then. And it seemed like he would stare down the barrel a little more back then.
Right.
And obviously, you go through those season-ending injuries.
Right.
That's going to be in your head a little bit. In your experience, have you seen guys be able to overcome that, in the NFL? Or is that something that's just kind of innate in their character?
I think it could be innate. I mean, I don't think in his case it was severe where, I thought, oh, my God, this guy can't play.
Yeah.
There was one quarterback I thought in this draft that was like that, and I don't want to get into that right now. But if you start falling away from throws, in the NFL, it's hard to play quarterback in this league. I mean, you're going to have people around you. That's just the way it is. I mean, look, we know how it is in the league. Good coaches, and Kellen Moore is very good. He can scheme things up on first down. He can scheme things up in normal down and distance situations. But when it's 3rd and 9, those situations, the defense, depending on who you're playing, will have the tactical advantage, and that's where your quarterback has to be strong. He has to stand. He's going to have to make throws with people, right near him, and you're going to have to do that. Now, Shuck's physically capable of doing that. That's not the issue, but you don't want to start, perceiving pressure, anticipating pressure, or starting to make those throws where you're doing that
exactly
because that won't fly in the league. And that I think for a lot of college quarterbacks that's an adjustment. Look, you guys know you've been doing this a long time. The way quarterbacks are brought up now with all these 7-7s from the time they're 10 years old, they're in the shotgun. They basically don't even drop. They get rid of the ball so quick. I mean, there's really no pressure at all.
Right.
They don't deal in that world. I mean, I remember watching Trevor Lawrence when he came out, and I had this conversation with a coach. You had to watch a ton of tape, which I did, just to find throws where there were people around him.
On him.
Yeah.
I mean, so, that's something that you really have to find. I go back years at the time when Blaine Gabbert came out, and he was a top 10 pick, I believe, by Jacksonville. And at the time, I knew one of their high-level personnel executives. We talked a lot at the time. And I told him I thought that was a big problem with guys. And I had to watch because at Missouri, he, did that quick hitting out, one-step throws, balls out. And I had to watch. And there were plays where when there were people around him, he just fell apart.
Yeah.
And that showed up in the league. Because the guy physically, Blaine Gabbert was as physically gifted as anybody.
Yes.
But it just, if you can't stand and deliver the football, it's hard to play in this league.
Greg, you're doing a football, like I feel like a football seminar right now, just talking about Tyler Shuck. One last thing I had for him, and something Ryan and I have talked about since he's been picked, and even before he kind of got picked, because we had heard rumblings about potentially him being the pick for the Saints. I would say like maybe 3 weeks leading up to the draft, even maybe like a month before. Is like potentially like the perception of maybe him being like a high variance type of player, of maybe the perception of in terms of the ability of, if he has the ability of being able to matriculate the ball down the field, or because maybe when you were watching him, sometimes in his game film, is he able to take the singles, consistently down the field, because when you're watching him a bit, it seems like a lot of the production comes from big keeper shots down the field, off of big plays. But kind of, especially what was it, the Clemson game, there was like this stretch where he just missed like 8-9 passes and things like that.
Right.
I think maybe I'm not, and obviously it's not really fair, but using like a quarterback like Cam Ward, I think maybe that's something like Cam Ward didn't get enough credit of the ability for him to matriculate the ball down the field in the offense that he kind of played in. Do you feel like Shuck has that ability in him to be kind of that field general that can take the ball down the field and matriculate it down the field? Or is he kind of big play, like a big play guy?
Oh, I see. I don't see a problem with that, and I think a lot of that comes down to the schematics of your offense. I think that's when down and distance favors you. Okay, that's where you really see the scheming of a coach really well. How they help the quarterback, because ultimately what every coach is trying to do in the pass game. And obviously there's a run game factor. I mean, obviously Kellen Moore this past year had the best back in the league and the best O-line in the league. And, I don't want to say it was easy. Nothing's easy, but you know what I'm talking about.
Easier.
It was easier because they could control pace and tempo of games.
Right.
And the quarterback was a runner. So that added another dimension to how defenses were forced to play. So it made defenses more predictable in normal down and distance situations. But the bottom line is, when you are in normal down and distance, that's where the offensive coordinator, I assume Kellen will basically be the guy.
Yep.
It's not, he brought in Nussmeier, right, as the OC.
Yes.
But I think and he would. So they know each other well, obviously. By the way, his son's a really good quarterback prospect, Garrett Nussmeier. I've watched. I've watched his tape.
Boy.
I watched him last week. He's a pretty good prospect. But anyway, the point is that you can control that more in normal down and distance situations. And what coaches try to do, if you talk to any OC, is they'll tell you that the goal is for the ball to come out to the primary read. Now, is that going to happen 100% of the time? Of course not. But you can control that more in normal down and distance situations where the fronts are a little more predictable, the coverages are a little more predictable. You can control that. And ideally, that's what you try to do, especially with a young quarterback. Now, keep in mind, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. I mean, this is what I love talking about. There's so much, and it's one reason why, I'm not a big social media person, because the game is not about, it's not a black and white thing. There's so many variables, and people want to make these bold statements. There's so many variables that are involved. I guarantee, because obviously I like Tyler Shuck's tape. And what I always said about Shuck was that I thought his tape was the second best tape. I didn't say he's going to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. I said tape was the second best tape that I saw. So if he goes out and wins the job in week 1, and I guess the schedule's coming out, I don't usually look at this. That's not like the first thing on my mind, because, it's made in me. I'm an old guy. So to me, every sport's in season, and this is not football season.
Right.
So, I'm not waiting with bated breath to see what the schedule is, But anyway, the point is, if he wins the job and has a bad game week 1, what people are going to say, oh, Cosell, you don't know what you're talking about. He stinks. That's the way it works. But, with a young quarterback, you're trying to obviously every coach wants to live in as many normal down and distance situations as possible. But now you're getting into, hey, what about the run game? What about the defense? The last thing you want to have to do with a young quarterback, particularly a rookie, and you saw this with Spencer Rattler last year, is be in games where you have to drop him back 45 times. You don't want to do that. And you start doing that, and then it just becomes too hard. I happen to like Spencer Rattler. I mean, God, he's another guy that came out of Arizona as the number 1 quarterback in the country. And that first year he had at Oklahoma, people were comparing him to Patrick Mahomes. So I think Rattler is a beautiful thrower of the football, by the way. He's probably a purer thrower of the football than Shuck, just in terms of pure throwing of a football. But you get in these games, and unfortunately last year the defense fell apart a little bit. That's which is normally doesn't happen under Dennis Allen. He got fired, obviously, and I know Dennis, and he is considered one of the best defensive guys in the league, and he is. But when things fall apart, you know how that goes. It all snowballs. And then fans think a guy's an idiot. Dennis Allen is far from an idiot when it comes to defense. But the point I'm making is, Rattler was put in just untenable situations. You don't want your young quarterback to be in untenable situations. It's just too hard.
Right. No, and that goes to, the whole competition going in, who should start week 1 I've been saying, like, look, I mean, give Spencer Rattler a chance with like an actual offense, like starting offensive line, starting
Right.
caliber wide receivers to see what you got, and then maybe bring Shook in there, in a couple of weeks once everything's settled down and you got everything figured out. Poor Kelvin Banks Jr. the, fir- the
Bruh,
ninth overall pick, and like he is just an afterthought,
chopped
because everybody.
liver.
Well, let me tell you something. You know, their O line is going to be interesting. I mean, they're going to have an issue, I think, at left guard. Because Dylan Radins can't play. I can tell you that for a fact. I do Tennessee radio, and he's
Mm,
not good enough to be a starter. That's just the
okay.
reality. You don't mean nothing's personal. He's just not good enough to be a starting guard in this league.
Whew.
But Kelvin Banks, he'll play left tackle. They'll move Fuaga to right tackle, which is what he played for 2 years at Oregon State. I thought he played perfectly fine at left tackle last year. So they could have two really young tackles. They could have two bookends that are really good players. Banks, I like Banks' tape. I hear, too, that he's an unbelievable kid. Like he's one of those kids, so that he gets it. He works. I mean, there's not an issue with him being a professional at all. So they could have two really good bookends. We know about McCoy and Ruiz. Ruiz actually grew up in the town, that I'm where NFL Films is, Mount Laurel, New Jersey. And I've met him. I don't know him, but I've met him. The main issue is left guard, but I think that, 4 of the 5 offensive linemen should be. Look, Banks is a rookie, so there'll be times he looks bad. That's the other thing is people have to understand that. I mean, he's going to look bad sometimes. He's a rookie playing in the NFL, okay? There's going to be guys he's going against that are going to make him look silly. It's just the way it is. But I think overall he's a really good prospect. I think he'll be a good player. He's an athletic kid, by the way. And Fuaga, I mean, he's just a man. So, well, I think the O-line should be pretty good, so we'll see if they can run the ball with some kind of consistency that to me becomes a really critical piece for them. Can they run the ball?
The point that you're hitting on especially is them having the book and tackle piece.
Yep.
Because we'll see how it plays out because we don't know. Putting Banks at left guard for like his rookie season.
Oh, okay.
And then shifting him
and
outside.
And keeping Fuaga at left tackle and then, going
Penning,
back to someone like Penning at right tackle or something like that.
Yeah. Which then, like, to me, that's like, okay, but then you still have potential. Then you still have a hole at right tackle with Penning. They don't know exactly what they want to do with Banks yet. You would think the simple thing would do, like, you drafted Banks, he was a natural left tackle, keep him at left tackle. Fuaga's a natural right tackle, shift him to right tackle. Maybe put Penny, try him at the Mekhi Becton plan from the Eagles. Maybe try him at left guard because he is a natural mauler and see if that works out. So I hope they have the book and left tackles because if so, that does help with the issues that Tyler Shuck has with the pressure long term going forward.
And by the way, again, if they look, they'll decide that, through now we're in the rookie camps and then the OTAs and mini camps and training camp, they'll figure that out and they'll put the 5 best guys out there in their mind. Eventually Banks will be a tackle clearly, but we'll see what they think is best right now. Obviously Penning's been around now for a couple of years. He's not quite become, he's a first round pick. I don't think he's become what they've hoped. Now, that doesn't mean he can't be. It's not as if he's been in the league 10 years. But clearly, they felt they wouldn't have drafted Kelvin Banks if they loved Trevor Penning.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And a new staff, as you guys know, comes in and sees things differently. So the new staff, the first thing a new staff does is watch literally every snap from the year before. So, they've watched all these guys and they don't believe Trevor Penning is probably starting caliber, and that's why I'm sure they drafted Banks.
No, and that would be understandable. I mean, it's funny because Penning's last year he played every game and he was solid at times, but then there was just times it was a disaster. He's just that type of player right now. Yeah. Another player they drafted, who I'm kind of interested in seeing is Quincy Riley out of Louisville.
Oh, yeah.
The cornerback. I didn't know anything about him when they drafted him. Talking to Cody Alexander, on the podcast. He was pretty high on him.
Yep.
What do you remember from him when you scouted him?
Well, I know the DB coach of Louisville. He's been at a number of schools. He was at Middle Tennessee State. He coached Kevin Byard and Reed Blankenship. Then I forget where he was, and he coached. Oh, he last year he was raving to me about Jarvis Brownlee, who ended up starting for for the Titans this year. And Riley played opposite him last year, and then because he told me, he said Quincy Riley may be the best of him. Now he wasn't drafted that way, but I can tell you for a fact that he loved Quincy Riley. So I mean, obviously I did tape myself. Quincy Riley's an interesting guy. I mean, he's not quite as big as you would ideally like. He looks bigger on tape, and I was kind of surprised when he just came in at 5'10" and 5'8". But I liked his tape. Like I thought, to me, he was. And you guys know me. I don't do lists, and I don't try to figure out where guys get drafted. But I thought he was better. I thought his tape was better than his draft slot. So let's put it that way. I thought that he kind of showed a deceptive twitch and suddenness to his movement. He was smooth. He was fluid. He played press man. He played it with targeted physicality where he could, disrupt the route. The question is he a slot receiver or is he an outside receiver? A slot corner or an outside corner. So I don't know. How do they see him? You guys might know that better than I, but because I think theoretically he could be seen as both, depending on how you want to deploy him.
Yeah, it's interesting because we don't really know. Brandon Staley's new defensive coordinator. We don't know how he wants to implement these guys. Alontae Taylor, hasn't really shown that he could really be a starter on the outside as a perimeter corner.
Which he was in college, by the way, but he's become a really good slot corner.
Good slot corner. So it's
they may want to keep him there. I mean, because right now, I guess if they had to line up and play a game tomorrow.
Oh Lord. At corner?
The outside corners be
Kool-Aid,
Mystery and Yardum.
Yeah, I would say so. I would, yeah.
Yes, I mean, Yodom's been in the league, for 100 years. He's good enough to play and start.
Right.
Like you can put him out there, but he's also not good enough where teams want to keep him. So,
exactly.
He's one of those guys. I mean, I have tremendous respect for those guys. I mean, I'm just a guy sitting in my office watching tape. Who the hell am I? But, a guy like Yodom, people probably think, oh, he stinks, But, this guy's going to play 12 years in the NFL.
Exactly.
Okay? You got to give those guys a boatload of credit. I mean, you know how hard that is? I don't know if people realize how hard that is.
Incredibly hard.
But I mean, at the end of the day, if you're being realistic, you're probably looking to replace him. So they may see Riley as the guy that they want to put at the same position with the hope that maybe Riley can become that starting corner opposite McKinstry, who was a second-round pick a year ago. So you got to give him a shot.
Yeah, I know they did bring in Asante Samuel Jr. for a visit a couple of days ago, who, he's getting over, he just had neck surgeries, and obviously there's familiarity with Brandon Staley.
Because Staley drafted him.
In this system, so it's the weakest area on the team, overall. I am interested to kind of hear your thoughts of maybe how you see some of the players they drafted on, because they went offense with the first two picks. They went completely defense until round 6 again, until they drafted Devin Neal, running back out of Kansas.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, if you look at their defense, see, I don't think their fronts is a bad group. I mean, Demario Davis, that's another guy. You just got to love that kid. When is that guy going to stop playing at a high level? I mean, it's
I don't know.
They got Davis, they got Werner. Werner's a nice player. I thought Brian Brees played really, really well last year. He's a really good football player.
It's so interesting. People are so decisive on Brian Brees. People either like him a lot or people don't like him at all.
Yeah, I thought his tape was really good. I mean, I can only tell you, what what the tape shows me. And again, you're going to see a whole different look this year with fronts and everything. Because last year they played a lot of dime. They played a lot of 3-2-6 dime. That was a Dennis Allen thing. So, when they went 3-2-6 dime, Breesy was pretty much a zero technique. And then they had, Young and Granderson as the edge rushers.
Interesting.
Or Jordan, sometimes Jordan would, because, Jordan's getting older. He can't play 70 snaps a game now. So, we'll see, what Brandon.
Don't tell him that.
What's that?
Don't tell him that. He wants to play every snap.
He's a phenomenal player. He's probably a Hall of Famer. Staley will be a 4-down guy. I mean, he's got a lot of the Vic Fangio in him, so which will impact the secondary as well, obviously, because they'll show a lot of quarters looks. I thought the signing of Justin Reed was really, really good. He's a really good football player who can do a lot of. So they got two safeties that can do a lot of things. I know Matthew's getting older, but at his best, I didn't study him in detail as an individual, but certainly in his prime and at his best, he's what we call a 5-tool safety. He can do anything, So, and Reed he's kind of the same guy. He's not at the same level, but he's kind of that guy in terms of how he can be deployed within your defense.
Right.
The best piece of financial advice I've ever received is to pay yourself first. That's why now with every paycheck I receive, I start by putting a little bit away for those rainy days. Today's episode is sponsored by Acorns. Acorns is a financial wellness app that makes it easy to start saving and investing for your future. Acorns lets you get started with the spare money you've got right now, even if all you've got is spare change. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns recommends a diversified portfolio that can help you weather all of the market's ups and downs. Using Acorns, before I knew it, I had a couple $1,000s in a little nest egg account. Sign up now and join the over 14 million all-time customers who have already saved and invested over $25 billion with Acorns. Head to acorns.com/EYL or download the Acorns app to get started. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/EYL.
Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
How does the sinker, the safety they drafted from Virginia, kind of fit into that safety room?
He's kind of a similar guy who can do a lot of different things. I mean, he's got really good size for the position. He's a tenacious, competitive guy. Like, he's the kind of guy. He was a fun guy to watch when I watched his tape. Let's put it that way. I mean, he showed up on tape. He's got a quick trigger. He's got good play speed. He made a ton of plays in pursuit. Because he's long, even though he's a 4.48 guy. It's not like he's a 4.35 guy, but he had really good play speed. He had stride length. Stride length is another trait for tall guys. So he played with range. I thought he saw things really quick. Like, for instance, I think he could be a really good cover 4 safety. And that's essentially what, Staley is going to start out with. They're going to start with that quarters look. That's the way, that's, his belief. I think he plays downhill in the run game, which if you play quarters, you're going to have to do.
Does.
He plays downhill in the run game with decisiveness and physicality. He brings force as a tackler. He would strike me. I don't know Jonas Sanker, obviously, but he would strike me as a guy you want to have in your DB room. He strikes me as that kind of player.
Yeah. Much to the chagrin of Saints fans, we were itching for the Saints to draft some juice this year. Wide receiver. The draft was stacked with tight ends and running backs, and the Saints just said no. Up until the 6th round where they drafted Devin Neal out of Kansas, which was okay. It was nice to get him there. Did you have any thoughts on Devin Neal as a running back? I thought 6th round, that's a pretty good value right there. It seemed like to me.
I like Devin Neal. He was kind of a fun watch as well. He's. I think probably for a lot of people, they probably didn't see him as explosive.
Right.
So That's why he drops. And, he ran a 4.58, and, immediately that's going to, drop a running back. But I thought he just had a really good feel as a runner. Like, I thought he navigated confined space really well. I thought he had quick feet and elusiveness, not explosiveness. And, those are different traits. But I thought he could make defenders miss. He was very smooth, very efficient. He never looked like he was working hard running. He had good balance. He had good body control. I think he's a good receiver, too. He's not as explosive as the guy I'm going to mention. I was going to mention James Cook. But I think he can be deployed in a similar fashion. Now, when I say in a similar fashion, I don't mean you're going to give Neal 220 carries. But, I mean, I think, he's a quality runner and a really good receiver. To me, to be cliched, I came away watching him thinking, this guy's just a good football player.
Yeah. Last one for me, Greg, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. Going into this upcoming season, Kellen Moore's first season.
Yep.
How do you what's just so fascinating is that this is going to be the first full season that's, for us as fans, there's going to be completely no ties to Sean Payton, essentially at all, right? Even last year, there was still some tangential ties to the Sean Payton regime to some type of way. But this is going to be the first season completely removal of ties to that. How do you see the scheme and offense that Kellen Moore is going to bring to the Saints coming in? And how is it going to look?
I'll answer it this way, because we just saw it in Philly. One thing Moore will do is he will play to what he believes his talent can do well. Because I can tell you for a fact, the Eagles were 2-2 this past year at the going into their bye week, because they had an early bye week, week 5. And, Kellen Moore has a really expansive offensive approach. He wants to do a lot of things. And everybody in that building, the Eagles building, kind of got together and said, hey, that's not what this group of players does best. And they kind of condensed things and became what they then became to win a Super Bowl. So he's willing to do whatever is necessary to make this work. So the bottom line is, at this point in time, barring something dropping out of the sky, which is not going to happen, there's no quarterback store where you just go, oh, let me get a new quarterback. The bottom line is it's going to be Shuck, Rattler, or Hayner. We're going to go through that process. By the way, Hayner was a fascinating watch in college. I'm not sure he's a true NFL starter, but he was a fascinating watch in college. But anyway, so it's going to be one of those guys. So he's going to have to tailor his offense to the fact that you have to protect them to some degree, but also you still have to be proactive. In other words, you can't play to hide your quarterback. You can help your quarterback, but you can't hide your quarterback. It's the NFL. There's a difference there. This is not 1970 where your quarterback can throw 7 balls and you can win football games. So, he'll play to that. I think the O-line, who's the O-line coach? Do you guys know?
Oh.
I don't know. I didn't look up the coaching staff. I know Nussmeier's the OC and Staley's the DC.
Yeah. And they did get a former Saints guy, but I can't remember if he's doing running backs or...
Hold on. I'm trying to pull it up right now.
Well, the point is the O-line coach becomes a critical piece to this offense because their O-line is going to have to be able...
Brandon Nugent?
Okay, I don't know him at all. Okay. But the point is, obviously, they're not going to have an Eagles run game like the Eagles had with Barkley.
Right.
We know that. But the run game is going to have to be a really meaningful part of what they do. They're going to have to try to control the pace and tempo of games with the run game. They're going, because that'll help whoever the quarterback is so he doesn't have to drop back 40 times. It will shorten games, which is what in some ways they're going to have to try to do. And their defense becomes critical as well. I mean, Staley, I know that it didn't work out in with the Chargers, and he had that bad national TV game where they gave up 60 points, and everybody thinks Staley is an idiot. But I've been around Brandon Staley, and I can tell you for a fact that he is considered brilliant. So, it just, you know how this stuff works in the league. It's like what happened with Dennis Allen. People probably think he's an idiot. It doesn't. That's not the way it works at all. You guys know that. So it's all becomes tied. When you're playing with a young quarterback, everything is tied together more than ever. If you have Mahomes or Josh Allen, I mean, obviously the Chiefs under Spags have a great defense, but I mean, if you have one of those guys at quarterback, they can make up and compensate and camouflage some other things with your team in a given game. That's not the way it is when you have a young quarterback.
No.
So everybody's going to focus on whether it's Shuck or Rattler or whoever the starter is, and they're going to have bad moments and maybe bad games, but that's where the rest of the team has to become a factor here. And you have to think about. I'm not a special teams guy. There's not enough time in my life for that. But even the special teams become a huge factor now, because now you get into the field position element, and what do you do if it's 4th and 3 and you're on your own 50-yard line? I mean, now there's so much. And by the way, all this stuff will be thought about before you get to the games. You're going to have a plan, of how you want to play. But it becomes a really big deal, when you have a young quarterback.
No question. I always try to tell, Saints fans, man, rookie playing quarterback is just hard, man. It is so freaking difficult. And even when you think you find a guy, you got to wait and give it time. Not everybody's going to hit the scene like C.J. Stroud or Jaden Daniels last year. That's rare. That's this rarity that they just hit the scene like that. It just takes time in development, and a lot of teams just don't even have the patience to deal with it anymore.
No, and then the fan base, which is not that coaches should be making decisions based on fans, but with all the social media, all that stuff's out there. It's just you can't avoid it. It's just out there all the time. Look, we're in OTAs now, and you guys know literally every play somebody's commenting as if it's the most meaningful play we've ever seen. It gets a little silly. You know how that goes. I mean, it just look. I've spoken to coaches who'll say, look, even though young quarterbacks have to play early, that's the nature of the league now, and can have success. Look at C.J. Stroud. And others, I mean, Bo Nix had great success. He had obviously Sean Payton's great at that.
Yeah.
But I guarantee if Sean Payton sat down and you had an honest conversation with him, he would tell you it really takes 3 years for a quarterback to really figure it all out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's just the way it is. It takes time. And
no question.
We'll see. I mean, I'm kind of, just as a purist, and someone who doesn't have a horse in the race, and no agenda for me at all, certainly, and obviously not with the Saints. I'm really kind of glad they're taking this approach. I'm really anxious to see who wins the job, how it plays out, how it's going to work. It's because at some point you got to do this. At some point you got to play a young quarterback. You got to.
Thank you.
Everyone, every team goes through it, and it seems like they've been holding off on doing this for so long, and now however they got here, they're being kind of forced to go through this because it's just a natural progression of every NFL team. And
then it's how you help them. I mean, it's how you help them. That's just the bottom line. And then when you do call, let's say, a shot play, and the guy wins, let's say, because Shaheed can run, obviously, and hopefully Olave's fine. I mean, it was terrible with those concussions. I hate when I see that. And he turned out to be way better than I had him evaluated, which I love when that happens. I mean, people think, you don't like that because you didn't evaluate him. I mean, he's better than I thought he'd be. I'll be totally honest. That happens sometimes.
Happens all the time. Humans evaluating humans is hard. It'll take people.
Exactly. And so hopefully he's fine, and the first hit doesn't give him another concussion. That's what you're worried about. Yeah, I mean, because and here's a great kid too. So I hope everything works out because now they have Brandon Cooks, who, say what you want about him, he is a professional receiver. I actually like the Means kid, the rookie from Pittsburgh last year. I'm really curious to see, how he goes through training camp and the whole deal.
He's been working hard, too, this offseason. He's been putting in a lot of work trying to get there.
He's a big kid who can move. But the point I'm making is they do have receivers. So now, when you call the shot play, when it's between the 40s and you call the shot play, those are the plays your quarterback has to hit. When you have a young quarterback, he's got to hit those because those are the ones where you're being proactive and you know what you're going to get with the defense and you're attacking a specific defense. And those are the ones he's got to hit. You're not expecting him to be great on 3rd and 9. You're just not. You know that. I mean, you want him to be, and you hope you can really do a good job with him. But realistically, when it's 3rd and 9 and you're playing a great defense that shows you a lot, disguise, late rotation, pressure looks, the whole deal, you're not expecting Tyler Shuck or Rattler to be awesome.
Right.
It's just that's unrealistic.
It's a tough ask.
Yeah.
But we're fascinated to see how it plays out. Sorry, I didn't realize my camera battery was low. But Greg, as always, thank you so much for joining us and talking to Saints, giving Saints fans who maybe – and listen, we had our concerns about the team drafting Shuck before, but once he got drafted, we want Shuck to be successful. We're excited to see what he brings to the team. We're excited for there to be an actual quarterback competition because obviously we're fans. We want the best outcome for the Saints. The bottom line. So
it's going to be fun. I mean, it's whoever wins the job is going to legitimately win the job.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's and we'll see what happens. But and I've heard great things about Chuck, the guy. I mean, I've heard that he's super mature, really intelligent. Like everything you want in a quarterback.
Yeah, no question.
Well, thank you so much, Greg, for coming on. As always, we will hopefully have you on next year talking about the draft and the Saints draft class. Hopefully, we're not talking about the Clemson.
You're probably hoping we're not talking about a top 5 pick,
or maybe, maybe.
Right.
It's great content. Great content either way. I don't care.
But thanks for coming on this border. We appreciate you. We will be back. We'll be back. We have a lot of episodes coming. So if you listened or watched this episode, we appreciate y'all. With that, we are out.
Peace.
Going up.
Prices keep going up these days. It feels like being on an elevator that only goes up.
Going up.
But not at Metro. We're pushing the down button.
Going down.
We've lowered prices. Get one line of 5G data for $40, period. That's 20% lower. And you get a free Samsung 5G phone when you bring your number. Only at Metro.
5-year guarantee on eligible plans. Exclusions apply. See website for details. Not available at Metro with T-Mobile in the past 6 months. Tax applies.
Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.